Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. My name is Erica Arroyo. I'm the Associate Vice President of Engagement at the University of Miami and a proud double alumna. You're joining us for Kane's Conversations, Embracing a Virtual World. We're going to get to all of your questions. I'm sure you're wondering, in a virtual communication, is it appropriate to eat? How about those virtual backgrounds? Should I be using them? Where should I look in the camera? All those questions we hope to answer with our speaker, Jason Weiss. We're so excited, but certainly this is just a great tool for you to just improve upon your communication skills, whether it's virtually or not. We're so excited to have Jason with us. Want to let you know we have a lot of great programming offered through the Alumni Association. Check us out on alumni.miami.edu for all of our programming. Tomorrow night, we actually are hosting a special event with the LGBTQ Canes titled Embrace Change and Find Your Way Forward. That'll take place at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, so please join us. That's going to be moderated by Dr. Gisela Vega with our LGBTQ Student Center and Chris Ratcliffe, BSc 09. And that'll be a session about tips and tricks to evolve your relationship with change. Before we start, I want to definitely take a moment of silence to reflect upon all of the events that are happening across the nation. It's our responsibility as an institution of higher education to shape the world in which we live in. And it's our duty to do that individually and collectively. Our mission as an institution asks us to be active on all fronts and to defeat hatred and oppression. So I ask that you please join me in a moment of silence. Before I turn things over to our speaker, and I would like to just let you know we have the Q&A feature that is available at the bottom of the screen. The chat feature will not be available since we have such a large crowd with us today. We had more than 363 RSVPs, so we have definitely lots of alumni and friends of the university joining us. But we encourage you to ask questions. Use the Q&A function. It'll be open throughout the entire session, and we definitely want to get to as many of those as we can. I'd now like to introduce Dawn Minko, BSc 2012. She is the president of the Los Angeles Canes community, and she'll introduce Jason. Dawn?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Erica. My name's Dawn Minko. I'm the president of the LA Canes community, which is home to over 5,000 of our alumni. I'm excited to see us kick off a new fiscal year with today's great conversation. I'm happy to see that we have alumni from all over the country joining us today, and I encourage you to stay connected with the U. Some ways you can do this are by visiting our Alumni Association website, alumni.miami.edu, bookmarking your respective Canes community page via the alumni website so that you can be up to date on what's happening in your community. And make sure to follow the University of Miami Alumni Association accounts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at @UM_alumni. Shortly, we'll hear from one of our alumni, Jason Weiss, BFA 97. Jason is an expert on creating human connection, even over a virtual platform. He'll share his expertise with us and help us all to better utilize Zoom so no one must sit through another boring meeting. Jason works with leaders and teams around the world to help them with authentic communication and empowering them to bring their best selves forward. Jason is also an award-winning director and performer whose work has been seen on Broadway, on film, and on television. He coaches actors across the country, and his clients include Oscar nominees, Emmy winners, Tony winners, Golden Globe winners, and People's Choice Award winners. In 2018, he was honored by the Secretary of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs with the Patriot Award for his dedication to helping veterans integrate into the arts as storytellers, artists, and creatives. He lives in West Hollywood, California, and serves as the Vice President of our LA Canes community. Thank you for joining us for this Canes conversation, and Jason, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dawn. That made me laugh on a couple of occasions. I assume that most of you are on this call today because you're on a lot of Zoom calls, you're on a lot of webinars, you're on a lot of virtual communication in general. And you're finding that it's difficult to stay engaged. It's not just difficult for you to engage others and inspire them to take action, but it's difficult for you to stay engaged. We've all heard of Zoom fatigue. And that's over all of the platforms, whether it's Skype for Business, WebEx, Zoom, you name it. So the question becomes, how do you maintain a work-life balance? How do you maintain an inspirational tone? How do you keep your energy up? And how do you best communicate when using this virtual platform? Because the state of affairs is that this is here to stay. What this pandemic has brought out is the flaws in many business models. And being able to communicate like this virtually is going to enable us to have hybrid communication, enable us to save money in travel and things like that. So this isn't going anywhere. What we can do now is continue to refine it. And we can continue to make this an inspirational way to communicate. So over the next 20 minutes, we're going to talk about a few things that we can do to make this more engaging. After that, we'll have a quick Q&A. I'm going to share my screen right now and go over some slides with you. Now, before I do that, I'd just like to say one of the best ways to engage people is not to use slides. However, this is a webinar. It's not interactive. So I'm going to show you these slides so you can see them. However, you'll find that a human being speaking is often more engaging than a slide. I've been married for almost 5 years now, and I have never, ever come home once to my wife and said, baby, you would not believe the bullet point that I saw today. That's never happened in my experience. So let's just start off from the top. What we're going to do today is talk about engaging in the virtual world. And it's not that much different than engaging in the physical world. There's just some adjustments that we need to do. So there are a lot of challenges that we have to overcome. There's obstacles that we have to overcome. And when we overcome them, it leads to a lot of advantages that this platform has. So some of the obstacles I already talked about. It's a lack of engagement, being tired, lots of distractions. Whatever device you're using right now to watch this webinar, whether it's your computer, your tablet, your phone, whatever device it is one of the single most distracting devices that's ever been created. And that's what you're using to watch this webinar. You're also using it on business calls. You're also using it when you're teaching. You're also using it when you're learning. You're also using it when you're having family connections and friendly connections. So how do you overcome the obstacles of distraction, and how do you overcome the obstacles of not being engaging? So let's start from the top. Over the next 20 minutes, we're going to work on 3 things. Virtual fluency, high fidelity, how do you come across better? Orchestration and structure, how do you organize a meeting, how do you structure it? And then building relevance right from the beginning, assuming that people don't want to be there. So how do you ramp up their engagement as quickly as possible to help them stay that way? Normally, this is a point where I would say, how does that sound? But I will take your silence as a yes, that all sounds great. So let's keep moving. So let's start with virtual fluency. You've all noticed some odd behavior, I'm assuming, when communicating virtually. People's animals walking around, kids coming into frame, lots of noises, things like that. A lot of that's out of your control. But there are a number of things that are in your control. And just like I doubt many of you would walk into a high stakes meeting or any type of high stakes communication, disheveled, unprepared, not being ready to perform, you can do those same things virtually. So let's go through 6 of those right now that you have direct control over to make sure that your message comes across. You've all seen this guy, the up the nose camera, the most flattering shot that anyone can have. That's when your computer is sitting on your desktop and you're looking down at like this, or it's at an angle and you're just looking straight ahead as your computer's up at you. The next one is what I like to call the witness protection plan. That's when you got a whole bunch of lighting behind you and nothing in front of you. And this reminds me of Spaceballs. Like, how do I know he's not making faces at me right now? The next one is this woman right here who looks like just an ordinary, regular woman. What's wrong with this? Well, what's wrong is she's not giving us her eyes. She's obviously reading on her screen, and there's nothing wrong with reading from your screen. The best part about notes is that they're there. However, as you'll notice, I'm looking at the camera right now to try to create a connection. If I have to look at my screen for a moment, I'll look at it and then bring it back up to you, just as if I was speaking at a lectern. Because hiding my eyes it brings out a red flag in the back of your mind that says, don't trust him. And this is from thousands and thousands and thousands of years of evolution. Then we've got this one here. So unfortunately in this picture, the most interesting things are not what she has to say. So just make sure that whatever is on you and behind you isn't more interesting than what you have to say. That being said, you'll notice there's things behind me. I don't like, this is a personal preference, I don't like having just a wall behind me. I don't like having a green screen with a virtual background. You know, I've got some books, I got a typewriter, I got a painting here. This is the first step into authentic communication. This is the first step into me being seen as a human first and my job title second. Someone is being brought into my home. You watch television, you bring people into your home to watch them. So this is a sacred thing we're doing. So you're showing a little bit of who you are, but without going overboard. The fifth one, this one looks perfectly natural. The problem is this woman is in a busy office with all overhead lights and a lot of sound going on all around her. Now, I'm going to make the assumption that many of you have been working from home for the past 2.5 months. And chances are your partners or your roommates or whomever you live with is also working from home. So you can't tell them to please be quiet on your Zoom call while I'm on my Zoom call. So this is where you have that option of utilizing the mute button. So if you're not speaking, be on mute, because you can't control if your dog barks or if he squeaks on his toy or if your cat meows or if there's helicopters because about 2 blocks away from you are 1,000 people protesting in the street. You can't control that. And then finally, we have the worst of all. This is when it's a little too private in public. You're on a business call, and we've all seen a lot of these videos that have popped up over the past 2 months of people pretending they're paying attention. They accidentally turn their camera on, and you can see they're still in bed. In general, it's just rude to eat when you're on a Zoom call, unless you're having a dinner call or you're having a cocktail hour. But just conduct yourself the way you would in a normal meeting and avoid these 6 deadly sins of teleconferencing and virtual communication. The problem is low fidelity interactions. The people to whom you're speaking want to listen to you. They want to be engaged. They want to be inspired. It's like when you go to the theater or you go to a movie, you want to believe the actors. That's why you're there. But when they give you reasons not to believe them, that's when you check out. These 6 pictures here are ways that you're providing people reasons not to be engaged. So eliminate those problems. The solution is elevating your digital presence. So what you can do to make sure that you look better is put your computer on a box so that your camera is at eye level. So right now my camera's on eye level. It's on a box about this high. I can always change my angle. I have a light right there to my right, and I have a light right there to my left that's bouncing off of my ceiling to give me proper lighting. I don't expect anybody to go out and buy professional level lighting. However, it's worth the investment to make sure that you can be seen and heard. I use this microphone right here. This is a Blue Yeti microphone. I'm on a lot of these calls. I deliver a lot. So the investment to make sure that I'm heard and that I'm clear. And then I'm also using earbuds so that I can hear. In general, any type of headset or headphones or earbuds are going to have better sound and they're going to have better microphones than your computer. So my recommendation is that you use an auxiliary device in order to be heard, in order to hear. So here's your webcam checklist. Make sure your camera's at eye level, light your face, make sure that your background is intentional. Here's some inside baseball. Before we started, Dawn and I were looking at our books on our shelves and we're like, well, wait, hold on, I don't know if I want people to know I read that book, so let me change that book. So just make sure that what's behind you is intentional. Make sure that your attire is appropriate. It should be appropriate for the meeting that you're having. I'm not wearing a jacket right now because this is casual, but I'm also not wearing a t-shirt and I'm not wearing my Miami baseball cap. I'm not wearing a tie. I don't remember the last time I wore a tie for a business meeting. And then make sure your audio is clear. Now, there are a number of settings that you can put in on Zoom in order to help you with all these things. This is only a 20-minute webinar for the informational session, so I don't have time to go through all those. However, my contact information is on the email that was sent out. If any of you have any questions, if you need help with this, more help than we're giving now, or you want me to work with you or your teams, shoot me an email anytime. I'm happy to help. That's how you can engage more using the technology. So now the question is, how do you orchestrate and structure a meeting? Now that you have all of these tools with audio and visual and lights, how do you make your meetings more engaging? You're trying to provide value to your team, to your students, to your colleagues, and you're trying to provide that value in the shortest amount of time possible. Because nobody wants to sit in these chairs on these computers connecting virtually for hours and hours on end. And unfortunately, the problem is that's what's been happening. We've lost the balance of work and life. So the problem is that people have a short attention span and they can be very passive. Initially, about 3 months ago, when this big move happened to virtual communication, my clients around the world were excited about it because they thought it would draw out introverts. It would give the introverts an opportunity to speak up more. It's actually had the opposite effect. What's happened more often than not is the loudest voices are still the ones being heard. So the problem is not just the shortest attention spans, also people being passive. So how do we overcome that? And the other problem is that there are lag times. You know, sometimes I see someone's mouth moving and then I don't hear them, and then I hear them and it's like a badly dubbed picture. And then there's also a lack of free space for social interaction. So what can you do as a teacher or as a facilitator or as a team leader to make sure that there's also the social interaction that happens when we gather? Because we gather for a reason. So let's go over some of those things and ways that you can remedy that. Because the solution is having a structured interaction. Don't just go into it willy-nilly. So if you're using Zoom, one of the best ways to utilize it is to use the gallery view so that everyone can see everybody. That you can see what's going on, that you can see people. And default to mute. Again, I don't know when my dog is going to bark. I don't know when things are going to happen. So just stay on mute. And here's a little trick. If you just press the space bar, you come off of mute. So you can just press it, talk, and then turn it off. And then raise your hand or use the chat. You can use a physical hand, you could use the digital hand, so you can let people know, listen, I'm going to be talking for about 10 minutes right now, but if anybody has any questions, please just raise a physical hand, because if you're all in gallery view, I can see it, or just type into chat, I have a question. So here are some of the tools that you can use on Zoom. So the chat tool can be used in a lot of ways that people don't utilize it. I have here all together in periods. So one way to draw out people's ideas and to prevent people from being alienated or feeling alienated is that you tell people type in your answer in chat, but don't hit send, so that everyone has typed in at the same time, and then you hit send and all of their answers come up at once. So that it's not a popularity contest. It's not, oh, let me see what this person says. Everybody does it at once. And then if you want real honest feedback, have everybody change their screen name to a period. So when you're chatting, everyone's anonymous. So when they're giving their answers, it just says a period. That's a great way to draw out introverts. And it's also a great way to get some honest feedback when you're working with your students, when you're working with your colleagues. Using breakouts in Zoom are fantastic. You can do random breakouts, and you can also assign breakouts. When I'm leading programs, I usually do a turn and talk breakout once every 5 to 7 minutes, where I'll send 2 people in to talk. And here's what I do in the first breakout. And I'm not saying you have to do this, but it's a great recommendation. I'll give them 3 minutes. I'll say, all right, I'm going to give you 3 minutes for this breakout. The first minute, I just want you to talk and socialize. I don't want you to do anything business-wise. For the first minute, just talk. Talk about what's behind you. Talk about what you've been up to. Just have a human interaction. Then, in the last 2 minutes, I want you to discuss this problem. Okay, so here's the problem I want you to discuss for 2 minutes. And then when you come back from the breakout, I'm going to have one of you give a high-end summation of what you spoke about. How does that sound? Now everyone knows what they're intended to do in that breakout, how much time they have, and if they have a question, they ask that question before they go into the breakout. And this way you're keeping people involved and you're keeping it interactive. The third thing is you can utilize polls. How many people this? How many people that? And then finally, there's a thing on Google called Jamboard. Just looks just like that, Jamboard. And Jamboard is a way that you can use sticky notes and write things, and it's memorialized on Google. And it's a great way to bounce back and forth between Zoom and Jamboard to get people's ideas, to get people to post things. And again, if you have more questions about that, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll help you with facilitating that. And then past the tools, what can we do to be productive here? Set up and pass is a way to keep people from feeling that they're on the spot. I was talking to Erica earlier about this is how you put somebody on the spot. You put somebody on the spot, and I guarantee this has happened in all of your meetings. It's so listen, team, we had a projection at the beginning of this fiscal year that the first quarter we'd be up 10% in productivity. But as I'm looking at the numbers, we're down 5%. Erica, care to tell me why that is? Well, now she's, wait, what? I don't know what to do. So if I set up that I'm going to speak to her, I could say the exact same thing, but just giving her a chance to organize her thoughts. So I could say, you know, at the beginning of this fiscal year, this quarter, we had projected a 10% increase in productivity. And Erica, I'm going to come to you with this in a minute. But what we've noticed is that we now have a 5% drop in productivity. So Erica, if I can ask you to come off mute, I'd like you to give me your numbers and where you see this is going. That gives her an opportunity to organize and she's not put on the spot. Again, utilizing hand raises, digital or physical, ordered responses. Once those hand raises go up, I can then call out whom I'm going to call on. So I ask a question, I see those hands go up. Okay, great. We're going to start with Mary, then we're going to go to John, and then we're going to go to Drake. I don't know anyone named Drake. I don't know why that name just came out of my mouth. I think I was listening to a Drake song earlier in the day and it's just stuck in there. But now those three people know that that's the order in which I'm going to call on them. And then structured social interactions. Like I said, you can start breakouts with people just socializing. Another way you can socialize is by giving people chat partners. So I might say, okay, the two of you are going to be chat partners. So I want you to private chat with each other. So as we're going through this, the two of you will discuss things as we're going along. I am all for chat. And if people want to chat privately during a presentation, I'm all for it. Because how many times are you in a meeting where you see somebody on their phone and they're just like this? Just because they're chatting doesn't mean they're not listening. They might have a great idea. So those are four things that you can do to keep people engaged. And here's something to avoid: death by PowerPoint. If you see a slide like this, or worse, if you've created a slide like this, your engagement levels are just falling flat, because the mind is developed to retain stories, not data. So here's a little rule about PowerPoint. It's the 166 rule. One big idea per slide. No more than 6 bullet points per slide, and no more than 6 words per bullet. Again, it's what you have to say that is valuable, not the bullet point. Now, this is a guideline. This isn't a rule. If you have 7 words, the word police aren't going to come by and take you out of your house. Now, if you have 8 words, they're going to come calling. But this is a good rule to stand by. Again, it's all about balance. Monologuing is not a great idea in the virtual world, as I've just spoken for 20 minutes straight. But it's not a great idea in the virtual world. So teachers, this is a perfect example. If there are any teachers on this call, any professors, you have more public speaking experience than most people in the world, because you're speaking every single day at a very high level. The problem is that does not translate into this medium, because again, your students are on the most distracting device in their household. And if you just talk and talk and talk, they're not going to listen. So you have to balance how much you speak and how much you bring in other ideas. The virtual world is one of the greatest tools to be inclusive. And if you use it properly, you're bringing in ideas that might otherwise not have been heard. Here are some additional materials that you can use to help bring people out and to help keep this more engaging. One is exercises. Just throw in exercises during your meeting. One of them is yes and. If any of you have a background in improvisation or if you've taken an improv class, yes and is the idea that you agree with what somebody said and you build onto it. So you can have a 2-minute, 3-minute brainstorm session where the first 2 words out of everybody's mouth is yes and. A second exercise you can use is called the ladder technique. This is a great way to start a meeting, where you start a meeting with a few people in the meeting talking about a former teacher of theirs, talking about a favorite vacation of theirs, and expanding upon it so that they bring a moral out of it or a story out of it. And again, I can go into further detail if anybody emails me, I'll show you more about that. And then the third one is called the camera exercise. This is a great way to show inclusion. It's a great way to show diversity or to bring out lack of diversity without hitting it with a hammer. So in short, everyone turns their cameras off, everyone. And then whoever's facilitating would say, turn your camera on if you have had more than 5 Zoom meetings this week. And then the people who have had turn their cameras off, turn their cameras on. Then you say, okay, great, turn your cameras off. Turn your camera on if you, and then you just go on and go on. And it's a great way to see that people have a lot more in common with their coworkers than they thought they did. And they also might find that there's a lot of onlyness going on, as if, shoot, I'm the only one who does that. And then another one is called share an object. So, you just say, all right, everyone, let's just take a quick break, look on your desk and find an object. Here's an object. Find an object, hold it in front of here, and then go ahead and write in chat what that object means to you and why you have it. It's just a great way to bring out camaraderie and to keep people engaged so that they know that you care about them. Take a 30-second stretch every now and again. Tell everyone, all right, guys, 30-second stretch. Stand up. You can turn your camera off if you're uncomfortable and lead them through a stretch. Literally just have them stand up, tilt the camera up, give them a little stretch, get off of those sit bones. I have been sitting in this chair for the past 3 months and it's driving me nuts. So during meetings, it's great to get up, stretch, move the body around. So that's virtual fluency and orchestration. So now let's build some relevance. Again, assume at the beginning of a meeting, nobody wants to be there. So how do you get them to want to be there? You got to prepare it. You can't just jump into this and hope everything's going to go well. What type of meeting is this? Is this an organizational meeting? Is this an updating meeting? Is this an alignment meeting? Is this an all hands on deck meeting? What kind of meeting is it? And what is your ideal outcome that you're trying to achieve? Work backwards from that. And that will help you in this virtual platform to keep people engaged. So start with empathy. Start with what the other people, what your team cares about, what your students care about, what your family, your colleagues care about. How many meetings has she had this week, this day, this hour? What keeps him up at night? What are her underlying worries and fears, especially now in this incredibly uncertain time? And then where is he encountering resistance? Approach your meeting thinking about the other person, putting yourself in their shoes. And if you can approach without just talking about what you want to talk about, but what matters to them, now they're going to start to lean in, or they're going to start to lean back in the best of ways. So every meeting you're having virtually has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And most of you spend most of your time in the middle. Like that's the meat. That's where you're talking about your idea, your vision. But around the world, all of my clients, it's about a 60-40 split, believe that the beginning and the end are the most important parts. So let's just focus on the beginning to ramp up engagement. You're going to assume that they don't care. They don't want to be in this meeting. They'd rather be doing the work that this meeting is about. This is what half the people in your meetings are thinking, why isn't this an email? So you have to provide them with value. So if you start with what's in it for them, and you switch what I like to call the IU ratio. So what's the current state of your listeners at the beginning? They're down here, they're way down here, but you want to get them up here. So there's some prompts on the screen right now that you can use that make people believe that you care about what they're going through. I imagine you may be concerned with, you may want some clarity about. You may be feeling, you probably want, ultimately what you probably want, ultimately what you're looking for. It's all about them. So I'm not starting my meeting with, hi everyone, it's good to see you. Thank you for taking the time. Oh, okay, Fran, I see you got that extra cat in the frame there. And it's just non-caloric dribble. But if you start right away with why they're there, why they should care, and what's in it for them, you've increased engagement, especially virtually. Now is an opportunity to get into the agenda. Once you've increased that engagement, now you can tell them what you're going to talk about. Try to keep it to 3 things. We're going to talk about where we were, where we are, and where we're going. We're going to talk about what we need to stop doing, what we need to start doing, and what we need to continue doing. And those are the 3 things we're going to talk about. It's your job as a virtual facilitator or as a teacher, a professor, an administrator, to provide clarity of your vision, to help weed out the distractions and show people a path, listening to their ideas and presenting your ideas in a way that inspires people to take action. Understanding isn't enough. They have to be inspired to take action. So this is a breakdown of what we just covered. The first is delivery, your camera, your sound, your lights, your background, interactivity, chatting, polls, whiteboards, breakouts, clarity, sensory, and tone. Now, before we head into the Q&A, because I'm sure you have a lot of questions, I want to leave you with this. About 5 years ago, I read an article in the New York Times about the Japanese fishing industry and how it was on the verge of collapse because the waters around Japan had been so overfished that it was impossible to bring fresh fish back to market because they wouldn't survive the journey. It was too far out to sea, and they had to pack them on ice. Once they packed them on ice, the fish lost its value, and it was going to be a huge hit to the economy. And so boardrooms of fishing industries around Japan, all of the board members got together and they tried to think, what can we do? Now, here are 2 of the real ideas that the board members came up with. One was, well, why don't we get a bunch of speedboats and we can put little tanks in the speedboats and we can race out to the ships out in the ocean and then speed the fish back so they come back twice as fast. So they did the math, and it turned out they'd be spending more money on new boats, new captains, retrofitting those boats, and it would actually be more of a hit than what they were facing with the fish on ice. So they scrapped that idea. Second idea was, why don't we build a pipeline, like an oil pipeline, but for fish, and we can send it way out into the ocean, and we can suck the fish right into the market. Well, they did the math on that one, and it turned out not only would that violate a lot of international water rules, but it was also not an it wasn't economically feasible. So no one knew what to do until one of the boat captains said, hey, why don't we build tanks, fill them with water, throw the fish in the water, and that way they can swim around, and when we get back to port, they'll all be alive. So they did the math. They said, okay, what would it cost to retrofit? Could we do this? And they said, oh my gosh, this is going to work. So the Japanese fishing fleets completely retrofitted their ships, filled them with water, put the fish in, they got back, and all the fish were dead. The fish didn't move. They just sat in the water and they suffocated. So they thought, well, now we're doomed. Until a different fishing captain said, well, you know what? We catch a lot of sharks. What if we, by accident, what if we threw some of the sharks in with the fish, and that way they'd chase the fish around and the fish would move and they wouldn't suffocate? And so they did the math and they said, okay, well, how many fish would they eat? Okay, I think this would work. So they did it. They caught the fish, they put them in the tank, they threw some sharks in there, they got back and all the fish were alive. So the question that you need to ask yourself is, what are the sharks that you need to put in your life to make sure that you are not stagnant, that you keep moving, and that you don't suffocate? Virtual communication is here to stay, and you can ignore it and stay still and suffocate, or you can embrace it and embrace that it's uncomfortable and find yourself swimming home and increasing your value. Thank you for your time and your engagement. I'd like to invite Erica back up. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're now going to get into any questions that you may have.
Jason, thank you so much. I mean, there are some great takeaways there. I really liked changing the screen name to period to get honest feedback from your team and asking everyone for feedback and then making sure they all hit send at the same time so no one has a head start. The 1-6-6 rule with the PowerPoints and then just keeping it interactive. I think that is so true. Using all those different techniques from breakout rooms to chat to Jamboard, some great information here. I want to remind everyone we do have the Q&A function available and open. We did not open the chat function. We should have. It was just so many people on the Zoom today. We wanted to make sure that we could get all of your questions and figured that the Q&A feature was the best way for us to make sure we didn't miss any questions. So I have the first question for you, Jason. How do you avoid work burnout, or better yet, how do you bounce back from it during this work from home period?
That's a great question, and it's a question that is being addressed by a lot of top sources right now. The New York Times has been releasing a lot of articles about that, Wall Street Journal as well. I think one of the best ways to do that is to be open and honest about your own boundaries. The fallacy is that since many people are working from home right now, it means that they are able to work and take a meeting whenever, because they're at home. So instead of having a 9-to-5 work day, they have a 24/7 work cycle. So setting those boundaries is one way to start. That you say no to certain meetings if you can. That I am not available for that meeting. I said no to 2 meetings today. I was actually available for them, but I didn't want to do them because I want to focus on this webinar. Another thing is changing up your environment. So I have 3 different Zoom locations in my house that I use. So this is my office. I also use my living room, and then every now and again I use my bedroom. And because it doesn't, it's nothing nefarious. It just doesn't look like a bedroom. But I change it up. And that way I'm sitting on my comfortable couch for one call. I'm sitting in my office for another call. I go back to the couch for another call. Sometimes I stand and I put my computer right here on my bookshelf. So I'm standing. So mix it up physically. And that's a great way to avoid that burnout. But the biggest one is tell people when you're not available. I even put it on my calendar. Listen, I'm not working on weekends right now. Most of my work is international. So usually I fly around the world. Well, now I've got to keep European hours and Asian hours. So I'm sometimes working at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning. So I have email messages that says when I'm not available. Does that answer the question, Erica, you think?
I think so.
Great.
How do you inspire teams of different generations and internet acumen over Zoom?
So I think there's a question behind the question there. I think the question behind the question is young people seem to pick up on this really quickly, and the older generations seem to not get it, and it's mystifying. And I think there may be some truth to both of those things, but I also think that it's not always the case. So if you have multiple generations, you can utilize your team to help each other out. So I don't know how many of you watched The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary. If you haven't, do. It's excellent. But you look at when they were putting that Bulls team together. And the first few years that Jordan was on the Bulls, they couldn't beat the Pistons. They couldn't get past them because they needed other pieces. They needed other players that could help in certain roles. Well, you could do that with your team. If you have people on your team who are great with virtual communication and others who aren't, pair them up. Pair them up so that they can help each other, because those older generation people who might not have the virtual acumen, well, they do have the benefit of a lot of experience. And they know a lot about what's going on. They see things from a different perspective. And they can also help slow things down. Whereas a lot of the younger generation just wants to go fast, 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 and is constantly distracted. So if you pair people up, you could bring out the best of everyone, and you can create team alignment by having people interact who in the office normally would not interact. So those are a couple of ways that you can do that.
I want to continue on this. So the next question that came in from a viewer is, the concept of authenticity is being used a lot lately. How do we show our authentic selves while maintaining our privacy?
I talked earlier about, we're inviting people into our homes, and there is a certain amount of trust and vulnerability with that. And some people might not be comfortable having people see where they live or how they live. So how do you present yourself authentically? And how do you feel comfortable with people being in your screen or in your home? So let's answer that in reverse. First of all, the comfort level. Don't show anybody anything you don't want to show them. You may have to rearrange some things in your home. You may need to move some pictures away. You may need to move things out. In fact, I just changed this picture because I have a shepherd fairy painting that's usually here, and on the bottom of it, it says obey. And I started to realize, you know what, that might not be the best thing to have when I'm trying to lead virtual communication. So instead, I moved my De La Vega here that says we have so much to unlearn here. And I literally moved that this morning before this webinar. So you can decide what people see and what they don't. The other thing is, you don't always have to be on video. I believe that if you email, if you're not leading the meeting, well, if you're leading the meeting, you should probably be on video. But if you're not leading the meeting, let's say it's a bad day. Let's say your kids are being unruly, the dog threw up, all these things are going off. You email whoever's leading it first, say, listen, I'm not going to be on camera today. I am going to be present and I am going to interact. However, I cannot be on camera today. And then you as a team leader, accept that. Because if you force everyone to do something, that's not very inspiring. You can't demand trust. The second part of that question is authenticity. You'll notice a lot of people when they get on these calls, they start using this voice, and suddenly it's a totally different experience. And what I would advise you to do is, as far as your voice goes, if you go to the settings, your audio settings, and you click on that, there's a button that says test mic. So click that, and then just say, hey, this is me testing my mic, and this is what I sound like. And then it'll play it back to you, and you'll hear what you sound like. So you can make sure that you're speaking authentically. But as far as how you are, it's managing your state is what authenticity is. So what are things you can do to manage your mindset, your physical, psychological, and emotional state before a call? Well, one thing you can do is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Amy Cuddy's work of power poses, but you could just assume a power pose before your presentation, before you get on Zoom. Go in your bathroom or go somewhere in your house, put your hands up in the air, jump up and down, say, this is the greatest day of my life. Just do that a few times, and the body will start to feel better. It's the neurons in the mind that don't know if you're fooling them or not. And then when you're sitting down, if you want to be authentic, try not to close yourself up. Okay, if you can be open, sitting up relatively straight, have your feet flat on the floor. These are all ways that you can increase your state. And for more questions about that, please reach out to me, because these are not things that you can just snap your finger and be more authentic. It sometimes takes a lifetime of working on those beliefs, and I'd be happy to work with you on those.
The next question is, how do you keep staff motivated, and how do you know which leadership style to use with each staff and how to switch among them?
Yes. Okay. So how does someone keep multiple people motivated when different people have different leadership languages, if you will? Well, a good leader realizes that many of her staff and many of her team have different priorities in life. Not everyone's motivated by money. Not everybody is motivated by attention. Not everybody is motivated for making the world a better place. So it's your job, I believe, as a leader to learn about your team, to learn about what motivates each person, and to recognize that what motivates you does not necessarily motivate them. So gone are the days when it's, all right, guys, go get them. Those days are gone. So how do you do that in a virtual platform? Utilizing some of these tools in the chat function, utilizing some of the tools on Jamboard, those are ways that you can bring out different styles from people. But know your team and prepare the meeting. So if you have a lot of people on your team who are visual, they're very visual, make sure that you have a lot of visuals on there. If you have a lot of people on your team who are data oriented, like, just give them the numbers, then have that for them. But then if you have people on the team that also need to make a decision that are not data people, have a story that data tells, that gives a meaning to that data. So that when you're preparing your presentation, when you're preparing your meeting, you're preparing it for all the voices in the room, for the different types of learning styles. This goes for teachers as well, so that you can get the maximum input from them. And give yourself a break that it's not going to be perfect, and that everything that can go wrong is gonna go wrong. And so don't feel that it has to be perfect, and don't feel that you can't ask a question. Is that clear to everybody? Can I clarify any of that? And here's a great phrase. Instead of asking people, do you have any questions? Just automatically expect them to have questions. And you can ask it like, what questions do you have? And now in the back of the mind, I'm thinking, oh, he wants questions. It's okay to have questions. Hopefully that's a helpful response to that.
I want to stay on that point. What if you're asking for feedback and no one's giving you feedback? Because that's the next question someone asks. How do you know your session was a success when no one's giving you feedback? What do you do?
Yeah. So feedback culture is on the rise. The desire for feedback culture is on the rise. The problem is feedback culture itself is not on the rise, because what people consider feedback is different for everybody. So one is to have a clear objective before this meeting starts, and it needs to be a measurable objective. So if your objective is, well, everybody will understand why this is important. Well, how do you measure that? How do you measure if they understand that? If your objective is everybody will become aligned on this plan, everyone will create buy-in for this plan. Well, you can measure that, because you can literally, before the meeting ends, create a poll or have people talk about it. And if you've got 10 people on your team and 8 people agree, that's pretty successful. So create objectives that are measurable, and you could see if it's going to inspire people to either, 1, take action, or 2, change their way of thinking. That's how you can measure if it's successful. And don't kill yourself if it wasn't successful. Not every meeting is successful, and you're not the only one with great ideas. That's the problem with high-performing teams. That's the problem with great universities like the University of Miami. Everybody has great ideas. So what are you doing to make sure that different people's ideas are heard, but that you also have the wherewithal to rein those ideas in on a shared vision for the future?
A couple of quick questions. I see a lot of the same questions coming in. Where do we find out videos on how to use Zoom? A lot of technical questions. So where can we find Zoom 101 videos online?
Great. So the best place to find them is on Zoom itself. So if you go to your preferences, okay, and it depends on which platform you're using. If you're using your computer, your phone, or your tablet, or if you're using the desktop version or the application. I tend to use the application. If you go to preferences, you can scroll down the left-hand side and it says tutorials. And you can watch all these tutorials of what you should be clicking on and what function uses which. Here's what I'll do. I will put together a cheat sheet of all of the things that I find are useful to have clicked. And I'll also have a second section for those of you who are creating meetings of the pre-settings you're going to want to have. I'll create that. I won't have time to do that today, but I'll get that to Erica by Friday, and then she can email that out to everybody who, and also email it to the whole school. I don't care. So it's not like it's my IP. So email it to everybody, and it'll be a cheat sheet of all the things that you can click on to make you look better, sound better, but also to make sure the meeting is running better. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Great.
Someone asked, is Jamboard available in a free version? And what about the translator where a non-English given webinar or meeting that you need to have English captions for the viewer?
Yes. Okay. So the first part of that question is Jamboard is free. There may be a paid version, but I wouldn't know because I've never used it. So I use Jamboard all the time with my clients. I use it with my acting students. I even use it for myself because I can use a sticky note function for it to help me organize my thoughts when I'm creating something. And that's free, and it gets saved into your Google Drive. So each thing automatically gets saved into Google Drive. So that is free. The only downside to Jamboard is that it's not integrated with Zoom. So you do need to click back and forth between your Zoom panel and Jamboard. So if you are facilitating the meeting, you need to make sure that you're very clear when you say, okay, now we're all going to head over to Jamboard now, and then you've got to let them know, okay, we're coming back onto Zoom now, otherwise you're going to have people on and off. So that's the first part. The second part of that question, Erica, was what?
Captions, I believe.
Yes, translator. So
Translator.
I was doing a program about 2 weeks ago, and I had 2 native English speakers, and the rest were, I had 2 Danes, 2 people from Sweden, a Norwegian, 2 people from China, and a person from Thailand, and and 1 Brit. And so, and she was the hardest person to understand because she had a really thick accent. But anyway, half of them were on Google Translate during these sessions. And so all it comes down to is just give people time. So if I know that there are people where English is their second language, their third language, their fourth language, one, I'm impressed because I don't have a second, third, or fourth language. And the third is I will be more deliberate in the pace in which I speak and make sure that I'm enunciating so that Google Translate can translate my words. And I also ask every participant, is anyone using Google Translate? That way I know. And that way, if I'm asking Erica a question and then I see her do this, yes, then I know that she's using Google Translate. Now, there's also the opportunity if you're using slides, Google Slides, or if you're using PowerPoint, that you can do instant translation there as well. But you have to do that beforehand. So you've got to enable instant translation. I don't do that very frequently because I'm not very good at it.
Great. We have a few more minutes. I want to encourage those that have questions to ask them before we wrap up the Q&A. Question coming in. Do you have suggestions for meetings that involve a lot of collaboration where you have to produce a document or a policy and there's lots of folks on the line, many contributors? How do you manage that?
Okay, this is tricky because if you have to collaborate on a document or if you have to collaborate on a strategy, you need a lot of voices in the room. And you also need to discuss each option. So here's some strategies on that. One is what we talked about earlier in the webinar, which is utilizing the idea of yes and. Because the word but will just knock everybody out. So yeah, but, yeah, but, and nothing gets done. And that's what the beginnings of most meetings sound like. I mean, tell me if this sounds familiar. Yeah, but if we do that, we won't be able to do this. So that's why I want to do this. Yeah, but if we do that, yeah, but if we increase this budget, yeah, but if we eliminate this. So what happens if you start something with yes and? Yes, and if we're going to increase that budget, we'll be able to increase this budget next year. Yes, and if we increase that budget next year. And now it's going to open it up into a lot of possibilities. But eventually you got to rein those possibilities in. So all you got to do is add one little word, which is the word since. Yes and since. So what if we were to just raise the budget by 5%? Yes, and since we're going to raise the budget by 5%, we're going to have room to grow next quarter to see how this works. Yes, and since we'll have room to grow next quarter, we can take a look back on, and so now you're going down one line. The other thing when you need a lot of voices is utilizing breakouts. So get 2, 3, 4, 5 people in a breakout. So if you have 10 people or 15 people that need to align, doing that on one Zoom call is going to be really tough. So if you send them into small breakout rooms, mine the brilliance of those people. Use their years and years of experience in a breakout group to come up with different ideas. Allow 3 people to be in a breakout for 10 minutes to come up with a plan. Then each one of them come back and they give you the ideas they were talking about, and then you get another group and another group, and you'll find there's a lot of similarities there. If you find there's a lot of dissimilarities, now you've noticed that you've got a problem. And that's just as valuable as a meeting, because you realize, oh, wow, I didn't realize that we were not on the same page here. So those are some ways to get voices in the room. The other way, if it's, let's just say everybody wants the ball, okay? Everybody wants the last shot. Well, you, as the moderator of the meeting, you put everyone on mute, and they can only come off mute if you take them off mute. And that's one of the benefits to virtual communication is if there's that one person, Doug, he's just constantly talking all the time, and he's just constantly telling you why his idea is the best. You can mute Doug. And you can say, Doug, I'm just going to put you on mute right now because I think we all heard your idea. But Sally has a different thought, and I just want to make sure that she's heard right now. You have the ability to do that. Now, you might get Doug a little angry, but Doug can handle it.
Last two questions. First one, how do you maintain engagement with the younger audience in a one-on-one Zoom call, such as private lessons or tutoring for children?
That's great. So I've been doing that for a long time now, years and years. I've been working with people who I coach all over the world one-on-one. So how do you keep them engaged is, what do they care about? What's in it for them? A guy I work with, Rob Bedecker, he works with me at Stand Deliver, brilliant guy. His daughter, I think she was about 11 years old, and she was a big softball player. And he noticed that she was swinging the bat, but the way she was swinging it, she wasn't getting full contact. And so he had gone up to her, he said to her, honey, I can show you a way that you can hit that ball a lot better. And she's like, I don't want to know about Dad. Just shut up, I got this. Because he wasn't speaking her language. So a couple weeks later, he tried it a different way, and he simply went up to her and he said, listen, honey, that was a great hit you had the other day in the last game. That was great, went right over the shortstop's head. And then I saw that you hit a home run, and you looked so happy. Imagine what it would feel like if you hit more balls further and got on base more. And she goes, that'd be great. And he asked her, what do you like best about hitting a home run? And she said all the things she liked about it. And he says, well, what if I were to show you a way that you could just switch a couple things and might be able to hit more home runs? And then she's like, tell me everything. So finding what she needed to hear by what was in it for her, and then what they mutually had in common. So if you've got a one-on-one tutoring session with a younger person, you have the curse of knowledge. You know why it matters, but they don't. So how can you reframe to hear what they have to say? And then the other thing, and I think most good teachers know this, you can't learn anything while you're talking. And teachers need to learn a lot from their students. So get the students talking, ask them questions. And if they're not answering the question, ask a better question. And don't ask leading questions, and try not to ask yes or no questions. That should help.
Last question for you. What can we do once we pass this virtual world situation? How can we take some of the tools and techniques that you shared with us and apply them in everyday communication settings?
That's great. First, I do think this is here to stay in some form or another. I think people are going to be utilizing virtual communication a lot more. It's a great cost saver. It prevents people from having to fly all over the world. It's good for the economy, and it's good for the environment. It's good in a lot of ways. But the second part of that question is, how do we take this into our personal life? Okay. So one, go into your conversations with the mindset of, what am I going to learn today? What am I going to learn? Here's what's interesting. You're seeing things behind me. You're seeing things like that. I mean, most of you don't know who I am, but you're seeing a little bit about me. Well, what kind of questions can you ask people in your everyday life, in your personal life, in your life at work, to get to know them better, to know the why, and not just the what you do, not just, oh, so what do you do? But the why they do what they do. And now you know how to communicate with that person a little better. You know, my mom told me when I was a kid, I'm sure all of your mothers told you the same thing. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth. So don't be afraid of the silence that happens between communication, because that silence can speak volumes. And it seems to the person who's being quiet that it's an hour, but it's really only a second of silence. Hopefully that answers the question.
No, that's great. I want to thank you, Jason, for your time, for being here with us. Dawn, I also want to thank you for your time. Again, you guys can check out our website for more resources, alumni.miami.edu. We'll be sending a recording to you all, and Jason's been kind enough to offer to send some tips, but you can certainly reach out to him. He'll have his contact information in the follow-up email. Thank you for joining us, and go Canes.
Let's go Canes.